Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
I'm sure that all of us will. I'm going to introduce Jason at this time.
My name is Jason Lawmeister. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is September 14th, 1979. Where is she? Is that right? I like to check things out after I say them. I'd like my Al-Anon to stand up. CNC who made all this possible. This is my first time at a conference, and I'm glad it's early. I may appear partially nervous, but after I've buttoned and unbuttoned my jacket 4 or 5 times, I may relax. Those of you who showed up this early, I think that's great. This is, it's early in the morning for me. 9 is early. I had 2 wake-up calls at 6:15 and 6:15. Got to back things up. The motel proper phoned and a friend in AA. Both said the same thing. It's 6:15. I'm glad to be here. I really am. As I related earlier, I get nervous. But I have discovered when I get nervous is the times that I'm closest to God. And that is always a neat experience. And I always forget that. And when the pressure's there, and I've tried to think of everything that I know that's in my power to think of, and all I face is fear, then I finally give up, and I look upstairs, and a feeling of peace comes over. Because I know that no matter what I do this morning, you will still love me. And for that I am grateful, because I've been in a lot of places where that was not true. Buddy, this is my last chance. Maybe my first and last chance. I want you to take this. I'm going to buy a lot of these. I want a discount. I want to thank my father-in-law in the committee for what they did in inviting me to speak. I really do appreciate it. And it is truly an opportunity. I have enjoyed my life in AA, and I'm not going to tell you I have not had bad days, but that thing, that spark that lit up when I first got into AA has never dimmed. It has only brightened. And it's like the donkey with the carrot. I have never been able to get all you have. And every time I do something like when I did my 5th step, I thought, well, that's all there is, like that old Peggy Lee song. But it wasn't. It only got better. And I'm at a point now, at least, where I have never felt the way that I feel. Generally, on a daily basis, when I do the right thing. And I've just never been up there before. And I always used to get to those places, or try to get to those places, and then fall down. And I know that if I do what you tell me to do on a daily basis, that it will be all right. I guess that tough thing for me to do is to accept the good things. The friendships, the intimacy, the respect. There ain't nothing like having a little respect back. It is tremendous. And getting a little humor back. It is fantastic. I was born in, I'm 43 years old. I was born in San Francisco, California. And both my parents, well, I'll have to clarify that. My step-parent and my mom both drank. And mom was, but not all the time, you understand. Mom would be up in the room, and she'd be staring out that window That 9-mile look. I could just never understand that look. And I'd try to say stuff or annoy her or anything just to get her attention back, and then she'd sort of look at me, and I just felt that there was something missing there. And that bond that I was looking for from my mom, I was never able to really find until I got into AA. And then a multitude of people have provided that bond, but Mom could never give me that thing that I wanted from Mom. And then there's a lady over at Lake Whitney who described that one day, and she said that she's just incapable. She was incapable of doing that. She loved you and you loved her, but that was not within her power to do that. And that particular blessing of feeling accepted and feeling that give and take of that love thing, you would find in AA later on. And I found that today. And my mom passed on just after I got into the program. But before I was able to reunite with her, and I wondered what to do about that. And somebody suggested that you write her a letter and that you publish that. And I said, publish? And they said, yeah, just read it to a group of people that you trust. And I did that. And I was in a men's step study group, and it was a good feeling. And I told her a lot of stuff. One time I was at Jerry Fisher's house. You don't know this guy. And I shouldn't use his last name, but he's not an alcoholic. He's a court reporter in Redwood City. And we were playing those telephone games. You know, is your refrigerator running? Go catch it. And this lady would not respond, and Rusty had dialed the phone, so I started cussing this lady. It turned out to be my mom, and I didn't know that. And I ran home, and I was just crying. And I could never tell her I was the guy that called, but I put that in the letter. And there's just stuff like that. I threw a Tinker Toy box at her door once, you know. I mean, just a lot of stuff that I had never brought up, you know. And after I got into the program, I had the power to confront those issues. And it felt good. And I'm okay with Mom today. I think she drank. I think she had a drinking problem. And she never found this program, and she really didn't have too many people. She sort of died alone out in Kaiser Hospital in San Francisco. So I just pray for her on a daily basis. That the man who has seen over me while I'm still here in the flesh certainly has the power to do whatever you do with people who did not have the chance to see when they were down here. And I do that for her, and I do that for my stepfather, because he didn't have many people, and he died. He died that same way. He was alcoholic, I believe, and he was drunk, and he started a fire in the fireplace, and it came out of the fireplace, and it developed or enveloped that entire house we lived in, and there was just an ash mark where he had been, and he never had a chance for this program. And so I pray for him on a daily basis too. And my real father passed away about 14 months ago, but I think he was okay. Anyway, I just pray for him all. I got this place in my big book where I read every day, and I just put the stuff in there. I just write it right in there. And then if it gets full, I'll just buy a new big book. Then I'll read 2 big books. So anyway, I was just your ordinary stepkid coming up through life. And I did not understand my stepfather. He was prone to violence. But he did not know any better. He would seem to hit us out of the middle of nowhere for no reason. I could never understand that until I became a step-parent. And now I understand that perfectly. I understand natural parents understand that perfectly, too. That rage that, you know, you only hurt the one you love. And that's the way it is. And I've, some of my greatest growth, I believe, if there is growth in this program, and I don't think, you know, I don't think there's really much else, has been centered around learning to love my stepchildren. I have 2 natural daughters in New York. I've never had any problem loving them, especially since they're 2,000 miles away. And they're just gorgeous, and, you know, everything's always right with them. And when we see them on vacation, you know, you can do no wrong. But my stepchildren are right underfoot. And I tell you what, the only solution I had to a situation like that I ever knew about was to run, was to take off. Harry Truman said it, you know, it's too hot in the kitchen, get out of there. Can't stand the heat, stay out of the kitchen. And that, as I may touch on later, is how I handled life. If I was uncomfortable, I left. And if I had to stay there, I drank or took something to anesthetize myself. And such as a situation like this morning when I was getting nervous, I would have done something. I either would have escaped or taken something for it, and then I would have missed out on that little moment I had in my room before I got here. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. So I decided I'd be either a carpenter or an engineer. I was going to high school down the peninsula, south of San Francisco, and I was always a puny kid. Today I stand before you, when I stand up straight, over 6 feet tall. In those days I was closer to 5 feet tall and stayed about 5'6" until I was a senior in high school. And I was a runt, and I just didn't fit in, and I've always had hair problems. Then I had hair on my head, but nowhere else. In places that are important for a man, especially if he takes a shower. And I used to, Dupree has his legs crossed like that. If I had my legs up like that, it was just white skin. And so what I'd make sure is I'd pull my sock up and pull my cuff down so that there'd be none of that white flesh there without hair. And my brother was just the opposite. At 13, he grew into a real man. He got those secondary general sexual characteristics, and which means hair everywhere, and a lower voice. I used to throw my voice real low. And Jerry Fisher's mom, Mrs. Fisher, used to say, "Are you making your voice low?" I said, "Oh, no, not at all." Tommy, Linda, find a seat. So I just, and that's where my sponsor said a lot of things started to mess up in my life, is when I tried to be something I wasn't, when I tried to be hairy and I wasn't, and when I tried to have a lower voice and didn't. And I became to start living a lie, and that was I didn't let anybody see me. I did not live in a glass house in those days. Consequently, I just didn't fit in very well. And I just started feeling sort of lonely, drifting around, sort of apart from everybody else. Finally, I ended up with just a few friends in high school, and then I finally got moved to San Francisco proper. At that point, we lived in Menlo Park. And started to go to high school up there and stole some liquor off of a grocery truck and was arrested. And they, at that age, they just slap your hand. And finally, I got in some other trouble. I was drinking at a dance and finally decided to go to boarding school, or the family decided. And at that point, after I went to boarding school, I did well. I did well in school because I was in an institutional environment. And I have to be careful of that. But I did all right. After I got out of that situation, it was time to go to college. And as I told you, I didn't know what I wanted to be. I didn't know if I wanted to be an engineer. I thought they drove trains. Apparently they build roads. And you have to take calculus to be an engineer, and I started flunking that course. So I switched to architecture, and then I finally took up a major in fine arts. And that's where I met the crazy people. And we had a lot of fun. And we were painting huge canvases about the size of this sign behind me. And one time, I want you to know, I sold a piece of sculpture, and we used to have, you'd have these kick wheels, and you'd put clay on them, and you'd center the stuff and make this pottery, and you'd glaze it, and they'd have kilns, or kill, but it's spelled K-I-L-N-S. And they'd have these little cones in there. It was a fascinating time. It really was. But the only thing I did is sell that one piece of sculpture for $50, and I noticed I was not getting rich quick. So I was going around with a Jewish girl at that time, and I happen to love Jewish people. My daughters are half Jewish. And she was driving by a law school, and she double parked while I ran inside to get an application. I thought it would be interesting to go to law school while you're going to art school. Now, I didn't know anybody else doing that, and I was looking for terminal uniqueness. I did not know it at the time. And I got applications to a number of law schools and was finally accepted at one and started into my law school career. And I really enjoyed it the first year. The second year, I met a guy named Dick C., who I don't know if he's in the program or not, but Dick was flunking out. So he took these little pills, And when he took these little pills, he rocketed to the top of his class. Now, I was already doing very well, but I said, I won't have to study or anything. So I started taking those pills, and I plummeted to the bottom of my class. But that nevertheless turned me away from those pills. I took those pills up to the last time I drank in September of 1979. But I flunked out of law school, and I had to apply for readmission. And the dean of the law school, all I have to say about that, he said if I wrote my law school exams like I wrote that letter to petition for readmission, I would have been the star of the class. I got back in, I was accepted, I never stopped taking amphetamines, and I started bumping along. Finally, the thing with with my wife, by that time I had married this girl from New York, and we had started having children. And then we started having a tough time. And by this time I was out of art school. And finally we separated, and I was sort of all alone again. And it was a different world. I had never experienced that before. And it was time to take the California bar exam. And I got very worried about that. And I didn't know how to handle that. So I did the only thing I knew how to do, but I did it all at the same time. I took pills and I escaped. And that means I'd take a lot of pills and then I wouldn't show up for the bar exam. Finally, it was getting more embarrassing than it was to do the other thing. So I took the bar exam and became a California lawyer. And then for the next 3 years, from approximately 1972 to 1975, I practiced law in California. And that's all I did because, as one guy said at a bar up in North Beach, I never drew another sober breath. And I just bumped along, and I ended up sleeping in my law office. And one morning I discovered that as I was walking down a major street in the financial district of San Francisco, lo and behold, I had no shoes on. And I said, I have got to remedy this before I get to my office. And I just end up wandering around the streets of San Francisco with my briefcase. So there was a drunk down at the bar who worked in a fashionable men's store in the early 70s. $75 was a lot for a pair of shoes, but there he was up at the shoe shop, and I bought a pair of shoes, and then I was able to come into my law office and start practicing. But by this time, I had been shoved around to a lot of law offices. I was losing respect. I was losing friends, and I was also staying at Mom's house, and I was nearly 30 years old. And things were not going well in my legal career. I'd gotten kicked out of one law office because I slept on the floor, and the janitor couldn't get his broom around me. The way I handled my legal situation at that period of time was I had a Norelco rechargeable razor. I had all those pills I was telling you about, and I'd wake up in the morning, and I'd mix a drink, and I'd take those pills. You can get a lot of duty out of a tweed suit if it's a dark color, and a blue shirt, and a dark tie. And I'd put all that stuff up, and I'd put on the Norelco razor, and I'd get shaven, and by the time all those pills hit with that alcohol, I was ready for court. I was ready for anything. And I'd charge in there, and I was very aggressive until the pills wore off, but I really wasn't doing too many people much good. And I'll tell you what, I was going insane. Every night I'd go up to North Beach, and I'd eat potato salad with a lot of pepper on it, and that was it, kids. I was not a success. And I knew some guys in law school who really, we had hopes on each other. We were working together. We wanted to do some stuff. And I just blew all that off. I just wasn't doing well. Finally, I guess I basically flipped out, and I was sneaking up at Mom's house. I stole her leather jacket, and I got a Phillips head screwdriver for protection. I thought people were chasing me. I put on 2 pairs of pants, and I got a little red satchel bag. And I said, this lawyer is going to see America. And I launched out hitchhiking around the continental United States. On a fact-finding mission. Mainly, it was the answering service and the telephone. I was just having a lot of trouble returning calls because I didn't have anything to say to these people. And I had no God in my life then at all. I ended up finally in Mexico where my natural father lived, and he had a $100 bill, neatly folded. I think we have those for kids. And he gave it to me and told me to leave. I took a great bus back to the border, and continued to hitchhike, and a hearse pulled up. That particular person was a funeral director and ambulance driver. He doubled, and he had those little metal things in the side windows. He'd pull those out. And he was on his way to Chicago, and he asked me if I was busy, and I said, not this morning. And it turns out that he had married Sam the Sham, the guy who sang Wooly Bully. He had married his sister, and he is also a funeral director in Laredo. And so we took this lady up to Chicago, and I tell you, my life was just a mess, and I was just drifting around in that $75 pair of shoes that started alligator, where the sole flips rocks in front of you to show you which way to go. It was just a mess. So I got up to Chicago, and I forgot it's cold in Chicago in the wintertime, and I asked him if I could come back, and he let me drive, and he fell asleep, and I got going so fast, he arose from the dead and back of that hearse, and he never let me drive that hearse again. And finally I got off on an intersection about 7 miles from where I live today, but it was a long time before I was to get back to Grand Prairie, or back to the Metroplex, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and find this program. I started sleeping in Salvation Armies. I went to Atlanta, Georgia, and became a high-rise window washer. And then I came to Dallas and became a high-rise window washer. And there are no telephones on scaffolds. And I had no trouble returning my calls. And, you can pay pretty good money being a high-rise window washer. And I really love window washer today. I want to tell you right now, so there'll just be no mystery about me, that I'm a window washer by trade and a lawyer by profession. And I continued on that vein and continued to drink, and then I went to a Parents Without Partners meeting on a street called Harry Hines in Dallas, Texas, and there was a beautiful little blonde across the way, and she was smiling, and I've always had a penchant for blondes. I've never known what penchant means, but I was attracted to them is what I mean. And we hit it off. And the fire lit up, and I did not know she was an Al-Anon, and she had no idea I was an alcoholic, but there was chemistry there. And we got things warmed up. We really did. We ended up finally going on our first date, cross-proposing to each other that very night. And then she phoned me the next Tuesday and said, well, when are we going to do this? And I said, what? And she said, get married. And I said, oh. There has been one detail I'd forgotten to divorce my wife out in California. But I didn't bother to explain that right then. I just tried to calculate the time period it took to get divorced in Texas, and it was 2 months. So I told her about February, and that was about 2 or 3 months away. I missed the date only in this sense, that is, I was able to get divorced without her knowing about it. I have a very secretive personality. But you're supposed to wait 30 days after you get divorced before you remarry, unless you marry the same, this is the last legal lecture, unless you remarry the same person. I didn't know that at the time because I was not boning up on Texas law out in those scaffolds. And so I went ahead and got married anyway. My sponsor happens to be a lawyer, and he told me it becomes valid after 1 year if she doesn't file to have it annulled prior to that time. So I waited for a year, told her, and everything was fine. We were validly married. Actually, I waited about 6 years, 5 or 6 years. And I had to tell my sponsor first. I continued to drink, and I was having a lot of problems. And I was starting to ruin even what I had, which was a small one-man operation window washing company in Grand Prairie, Texas. I was even beginning to ruin that. God was not in my life. Nothing was working. We, as she said last night, she wouldn't have given 2 bits for our relationship, and I wouldn't have either. That was the first word in every argument was divorce. You know, the one who said, first one who said divorce won the argument. You know? And hands on doors and things slamming around there, and tire tracks out of the driveway. Each has his own car, so you make separate exits, you know. And we were not trying to work out the relationship, you know. It had been based on some fire and some heat over on Harry Hines, and we had forgotten to bring it home. We needed help. The animal magnetism was gone. Finally, I did what I do best, and I continued to drink, and that really helped, and that brought on a crisis. And the clearest thought I've ever had was right there, and this voice came in my head, and it said, you don't have to do this anymore. And so I went home, and Doris, my mother-in-law, was there, and I thought that we were gonna have a big fight, but we didn't. She just simply hugged me and said, we love you, and she left, and it was up to me and Sancy. And so I said, I don't want to drink anymore. And she said, well, you're going to need help. I don't remember much of this, but she said that. And that was on a Thursday, and I remember dumping all those pills down the toilet. I thought of selling them at Sancy's office, but we decided to dump them down the toilet. I was not spiritual yet, yeah. And then Bill came home, and that was my first sponsor, and he's still my sponsor. But since I married his daughter, we decided I should have an additional sponsor. But Bill came home, and he had been at an AA conference. And he smoked Chesterfield Kings, and my stepfather smoked Chesterfield Kings up to the time he died in that house fire. And Bill needed some cigarettes, so we jumped in this little brown Chevy wagon, and Bill had never, and I had never talked. Just never talked. He had one time asked me if my intentions towards his daughter were honorable, and I had to lie to the man to his face. He gave me no choice. It was before the program. And we started to drive, and we were looking for these Chesterfield Kings, and he started to tell me about his story. And it's one of the most memorable times I've ever had in my life, because something happened that day that was too later to bring me right to where I stand in front of you. And that was that he started talking about his life, and he did not lecture me about his daughter. And he looked straight ahead, and he let me do the driving. And I didn't know if he was smoking. I don't even know if we got the cigarettes. And he started telling me about a lonely, empty feeling he had had all his life. And it reminded me of Menlo Atherton High School and all those kids not fitting in. And he told me about this crazy day when he went up to a funeral home and got this Cadillac and picked up people at the airport and made speeches. And I remember I had bought a Cadillac on credit before they had computers on a Friday night. And all this stuff started to gel. And I remember giving great speeches, but I don't remember anybody listening. And he went on and on. And then he says he woke up one day and he came out of this blackout and he realized that he was trying to kill his wife. And it all came together. And I said, that was just exactly like me. And the first time anywhere, this man, just by simply talking, had taken all these crazy pieces of this puzzle, which had never fit together before, and put them together. And it seemed to spell out alcoholism. And it seemed he had been in the program for 2 years by that time. He asked me if I'd like to go to a meeting. I said, hell yeah. And he took me up and he said, would you like to listen to a tape? And I had told none of these people that I used to be a lawyer out in California. I said, yes, I would like to listen to a tape. And he put on Ray OK from New York at that time. And Ray started talking about his brother Billy, and he said, there's a line that nobody will go below. And he said, some of us, we call that our bottom. And he said, but for others of us, that is death. And that's what happened to his brother Billy. And I remember my stepfather, a grand guy, a really great guy. I never realized how much I loved that man until it was too late to tell him. He had walked me up to a bus stop once because this bus driver had taken all my change. I asked him for $1 worth of change. He said, put it in there. It was only a quarter. I put all 4 quarters in there. Bill marched me up there and waited for that bus. And he said, you took this money from my son and give it back. And that bus driver just stopped right there and just turned over. And I realized that man was doing the best he could. And how much I loved him, and I just never had a chance. So I got into AA. And I liked it from the very, very beginning. It was just, I felt that I had found my niche. I felt that this was a place that nobody else had ever been able to provide me. And I was so grateful, and still am to this very day, for what Bill had done for me in that simple talk, in that simple time. I still had not told him that I was a lawyer. And I waited, that was in September. I waited until after I'd done my 5th step in March. And then I saw my later sponsor from Dallas, who was also a lawyer. And I told him in my 5th step that I used to be a lawyer. And so he just started to laugh. He thought that was funny, because I had kept that fact hidden for over 5 years. And my wife was home, and I came back from my 5th step, and she was laying down, and I told her she'd better sit down. I had something to tell her, and I told her I was a lawyer, and she didn't mind at all. It really didn't affect her, But I told her, but one thing is, I will never practice law again, so you don't need to worry about that. I'm just simply going to wash windows, Another thing that happened when I came home from doing that 5th step was I felt, any of you who are missing the steps are missing this program. I doubt if I'd be here. I remember like these large chunks of cement, of all this garbage that I had been harboring up there. I told you I was a very secretive person. It just started to crack. And I was driving home, in the big book on page, I believe 75, it says you take this book down and you start reviewing what you have done. And I did that in a Denny's parking lot because I knew when I got to my house it would be crazy, all the kids and whatnot. And I remember for the first time really feeling the relief and really letting those tears flow right at that Denny's in Duncanville, Texas. And that was practically a mile from where I had hitchhiked from about, 4 or 5 years earlier. And so I was starting to come home. And I had seen my sponsor, and I told my wife I was a lawyer, and I needed to work on myself. And these girls, I had these 2 little girls that were up in New York City, and they had never seen their daddy that they could remember. And thanks, buddy. And they had all they had was a picture of me skateboarding down a hill in San Francisco with no shirt on, and that was daddy to them. And I had a lot of hair when they took that picture. And I hadn't seen them since 1971. And the only time I called that wife back there in New York was when I was drunk. And every time I'd call, she'd say, send money, and I'd say, let me talk to the kids. And I'd have all those quarters up on that phone booth. I didn't get to use even half of them. And I had a lot of work to do on me. Because I tell you what, when I got into AA, I did not get instantly well. All I started to do, fortunately, was discover how sick I was. And I was very sick, you know. But I tell you what, this thing works good for me. I don't know about you. I'm still crazy, but I'm not quite as sick. I didn't know how to handle those daughters. I didn't know what to do about that. And I was way behind on child support. I had already been to jail for 5 days for non-payment of child support. There happens to be in the big book, if any of you happen to look through it. It's a great place to hide things from me, I guarantee you. But there is a paragraph in there that talks about husbands who have left, a whole paragraph. My sponsor pointed that out to me, on how to handle that exact situation. Anyway, by that time I was sponsoring a couple of people at my club, and I got this great inspiration. I should make my amends to my first wife, and I went down and bought a check and started writing this letter up at the table in the post office, and the tears were flowing, and I was putting a stamp on the envelope, and I'd gone to the library and gotten New York telephone books to find the address, and a thought struck me. Perhaps you should talk to your sponsor before making amends. And so I had to stop everything and fold all that stuff up, and I went home, and I called him, and he said, you might want to check with your wife. She may have some strong feelings about this matter that you're not aware. I said, oh, okay. And so I talked to Sancy, and the sparks were back. They really were. The flames was there. Yes, she had some strong feelings, and it was 5 months later before we did anything about that. I had to turn in that check that I had bought at the bank, that money order. I lost my $1.25, whatever it was. And finally, in December of that year, we wanted to do it for Christmas. We both decided on the same amount to send. And I wrote a letter, and I checked with my sponsor again, and I said, I don't care if I want to go to jail. And he says, do you really want to go to jail? I said, no. He said, take that sentence out of there. And finally, we got the whole letter together, you know, with phone number, with return address, and put it in there. And a couple of days later, there was a message on the answering service, and I was scared. And Sancy and I together knelt down and said a prayer. And we called that first XO lady, and she was disturbed only of one thing, and that was that if only I had told her that I was still alive, she would not have filed for Social Security to have me declared dead so she could get money. And also, if I had told her earlier, she might have been able to remarry. And she said that the girls have their own phone. They are not judgmental. Why don't you call them? So again, we prayed, and I called up these little girls, and they were just bubbling. And their names are Shauna and Michelle, and they just wanted their daddy back. And they wondered about if there's hills in Texas, if you got cows, you know, what cowboy boots are like, when can we come down? And there they were, that summer. That guy's there smoking Chesterfield Kings. Doris is cooking, and they're out there behind his boat, water skiing, beautiful, lovely life. And we were back together, and I had made a full circle through no power of my own, because I have no idea how to live. But this program gives me a blueprint which I can follow. I want to tell you something I really think, before I forget, I really think it's important to talk to your sponsor on a regular basis, and I've been in and out and fought that, and I have a deal where I call them on a set period of time that's comfortable for me. Some people that's every day, some people that's once a month, whatever, it really doesn't matter. But I tell you, boy, when I listen to him, I can take shortcuts across eternity. I really can, if I just listen to him. And that's one of the things that he was really helpful about. this law deal, which was, I think, was, I was scared, folks. And I called California, and they would not, Texas rather, and they would not give me a license in Texas, even if I was licensed in California. As it turns out, I was not licensed in California. I had had my license suspended, not for drinking, for acting the way I was acting while I was drinking. They came into my office and they found pill vials and Playboy magazines. It was just ridiculous, and all these, empty client files. And it's good I wasn't there. Time cures everything. I had to work on that, and when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. There was a guy who had spent time out in California, who is now a Beverly Hills lawyer. I don't think he'd mind mentioning his name, Ted C., that this guy that my sponsor knew, that knew a guy, knew Ted out there, and he was now on the disciplinary committee for lawyers out in California. We called Ted, and through just the way God works, a couple of calls and whatnot, and zippo, I was a California lawyer again. Just that quick. And we knew I could drive out there and put a shingle up if I wanted to. But I'll tell you what, I was becoming very comfortable in Grand Prairie, Texas. Very comfortable, and I did not want to leave my support group. And everything, this is where the fight was. I had spent my whole life running, from things. I'm not going to run to things. The thing was, I was scared to take the Texas bar. And I don't mind going to California today as long as I've fought that, because I'm tired of being scared of stuff. If I don't fight the thing I'm scared of, I'm just going to turn into the old me again. I'm going to fall down and crumble. So the next test was the Texas bar exam, and they told me how to do it. When the students are ready, the teacher will appear. And there had been somebody in AA who had had about a 20-year vacation from practicing law, and he was to become my legal sponsor. And my sponsor told me about him and said use him. And he taught me how to study for the Texas bar at 40 years old. And he said, you're going to walk down in that room. There's going to be a lot of skinny kids, and they're not going to want to be there, but there's going to be a chair there for you, Jason. And you have to think of that as God's chair. And don't look at that as a test. Look at that as an opportunity to show how the power of God can work through you. And when you go into that room and you sit at that chair, and you start to write on that table, just invite him in. And so I did that. And I tell you, it's like another one of those crisis situations. I have never felt so wonderful as I did doing this thing that scared me the most, because I had never taken a bar exam sober without pills. And I got down in that thing, and it's one of the most joyful experiences I've ever had. Now, I've never been so scared, so uptight, as my family can tell you, as I was through that whole ordeal. Yet they in my home group and people in AA stuck with me, and we pulled through. And today, as I told you, I'm a licensed Texas attorney. And I drove home from that thing, and I've listened to Roy Orbison tapes all the way back, and just started singing, crying, and I just cried all the way from Austin to Dallas, It's just a magnificent experience. And I got up in that hotel where I was staying. Bob W. said, stay at a good hotel. You might as well go for the gold. You're hopefully only going to do this once. And I was up there, and I was just in the middle of it, and I saw this freeway just covered with little cars. And I said, each one of those little cars has a little person in it just like me, who has every opportunity I have, and that's one of God's kids. Every one of those. And it was just a neat experience. I tell you, boy, I started to do every time I got to a question, especially oil and gas questions. They told us in California, the biggest sucker wins. That's all I knew about oil and gas. And they got this big examination here in Texas. It's a big deal, oil and gas. And I said, boy, I need help. What do I do? And I'm just going to ask God for help. So I asked God for help, and it was neat. It was really neat. And so today, I tell you, I've got a pickup truck, and it's got a briefcase in the front seat, and it's got buckets in the back seat. And, who's ever the most pressing? You last much? Do you want a divorce? What do you want? Life's been good to me. It really has. Some of the most stunning experiences I've had have been with the stepchildren. One I'll relate to you, and that is with Brett, my oldest stepson. Brett and I hated each other. And I called I didn't do that directly. I might get involved. I had my wife call the police on Brett. And two huge cops came in and grabbed this 140-pound, 15, 16-year-old kid. This is before the program. That's the only defense I have. And took him to Parkland Emergency for psychiatric evaluation. I needed psychiatric evaluation. And then he moved back with his real dad, and he and I had a deep hatred. He had cracked a rib. I told him I'm secretive. You're sick as you are secretive. I had never told anybody about that. And we just weren't getting along. And we had gotten to a point of fist fights, and he carried bats and knives around the house, and he said it's for burglars, and you all know who it was for. And I caused it. I brought it on, because I would constantly confront him in a violent way, trying to dominate the house. And that thing does not work for me, trying to dominate people. So Brett and I had a long way to come, and all I remember is I drive around days, and I just think about how much I'd hate Brett, and I would have imaginary arguments with Brett, and I would have imaginary fist fights with Brett, and I was obsessed with my hatred towards him. Got into the program, did my fourth and fifth step, still all this imaginary stuff with Brett. Wrote pages on Brett. Could not get rid of Brett. Brett has left my house. He's lived with his grandmother and grandfather, Bill and Doris. You know, they had to kick him out. Brett was tough. He's a lot better now. Everybody was having trouble with Brett. But Brett did do one great thing. He left his cat, Tigger, a 16-pound yellow tabby cat, in the neighborhood, and guess where Tigger parked? In my backyard. And I could not get rid of him, and his younger brother would, let Tigger in the house. And I had never explained this to anybody or written the rules out, but in my house, there's one cat gets to stay inside. That's my half-Siamese. Tigger and Feller, or is it, Tigger and Frisky are outside cats. I mean, that's just the way it is. I had not explained this to anybody. But I didn't think that was important. They should have seen by my continual throwing this white and gray and white, this yellow and gray and white cat out, that they belonged outside. And that the half-Siamese always stayed inside. They did not want to be changing the box for those two rogue cats that were supposed to be outside. And I just wanted this prissy little, perfectly mannered half-Siamese. One day, after I'd become spiritual and been in the program almost a year, and was treasurer of my home group, and a real leader, I thought, Tigger darted in the door as I was darting out to wash windows. And I just flipped, folks. Just flipped. And I ran over to him, and nobody was around, and I kicked him. And he started flying across the room, except he hit a chair, and then he left the house voluntarily with a bad limp. And I didn't know what to think, but I came home that night, and lo and behold, Corey, the younger stepson, said, Tigger's leg is broken. Me and the boys are going to form a posse. We're going to go find out who it is. I said, great, go get him. I'll take him up to a vet. $181 for this steel pin to go in Tigger's leg, walking around the house. He now is an inside cat, I might add. That was out the price for removal. That was more later. I'm in the program now 7 days before I tell my sponsor about this. Sick as we are secretive. He says you're going to have to tell him. So what I do is I practice on the little one. I said, Corey, sit down. Never tell a kid to sit down. He says, I'm the one who broke Tigger's leg on Tigger, the cat. He said, don't tell me, tell Brett. And he jumps out and starts running out the door. And I said, oh, my God. At this point, Brett was down at my...
This is the end of side one. Side two is cued. Ready if you're listening now. Over.
Bill had brought him down for a living problem. And Brett was by this time a lot larger than 140 pounds. He was closer to 180 or 200. And you have to understand, I had this deep hatred for him, but I also had this deep love for the AA program. And I was caught between a rock and a hard place. I'm going to have to tell this kid that I broke that cat's leg, and he's going to kill me right there in my home group. So I asked Brett to sit down. And Brett sat down, and I said, I broke Tigger's legs. This is 8 or 9 days later, And he says, yeah, he gets under your feet and you stepped on it. I said, no, Brett, I lost my temper and I kicked him and I broke his leg, and these big tears started jumping out of Brett's eyes. And he jumped up spontaneously and he hugged me and he said, "I love you." And that whole thing dissolved. And it went away. And Brett and I are like that. We are perfect today. I consider him my own son. And matter of fact, I'm his dad. And I am the granddaddy to his child. He has a child now, and I get to enjoy her. And I didn't know how to do that. See, my solution to life was, if it gets uncomfortable, leave. If it gets hot in the kitchen, get out of the kitchen if you can't stand the heat. And I didn't have a blueprint for living, and this program has provided that. So, AA has been good. It has really been great. I want to tell you, the law practice is coming right along. It was real scary. It was real frightening at first. It's been almost 2 years now. By listening to my sponsor, that lawyer over in Dallas, sometimes it takes 6 months to hear him. He told me 6 months ago I should phone a lawyer in the program in Grand Prairie and ask him if he had any ideas about office sharing and all this stuff. And I said, yeah, and I hung up and I didn't do it. About a month ago I called my lawyer, my sponsor, up about this same problem. He said, well, call this guy, Jerry, over in Grand Prairie, and see if he has any ideas about office space and this stuff. I said, you told me to do that 6 months ago. He said, that's right. And so before letting go of the phone this time, I just phoned this guy over in Grand Prairie, and boom, just instantly we hit it off. And it's been fantastic. It really looks good. It really feels good. Now it could blow up. It could blow up tomorrow. It could blow up tomorrow. But I tell you what, I never was able to be comfortable when I was a child. I always felt a dis-ease or a discomfort. And when I was drinking or when I was just trying to live, I always wanted to be somewhere. I didn't like Jerry Fisher's mother that much, but I thought he had a good father. But Richard Koblich had a good mother, and I wanted those two for parents. You know, they'd be better than mine. Anything would be better than mine. You know, when I'd be drinking at Gino Carlo's in North Beach, I'd want to be at Mooney's Irish Pub. I was never comfortable. And today, I'm comfortable a lot. Now, thank God my wife's not speaking. Because I get restless, irritable, and discontent. You know, I still have the disease. And thank God I do. I think it helps keep me sober, those outbursts I have. But I'm just better, and I feel comfortable today. And what I was getting around to is just this law thing is just an exciting thing. And even the thing of still washing the windows. See, my sponsor tells me I can't get rid of that. I have petitioned him many times, you know. And he says, hold on to it. You need the income right now. I used to, as a teenager, as a young man, there was a couple of mornings when I woke up when I felt just perfect. And I was excited about being alive, and everything was wonderful. This was without drugs. There were a few days, a few moments when I had that feeling. That feeling of being okay and of belonging has become something that's reachable or obtainable today, daily, when I choose to reach for it. It never comes, at least to me, unless I ask for help from my higher power. Because that's the only way I feel safe, as long as I realize what's important down here really isn't too important without him up there. That is the way it is in my own life. I can never conjure that up in myself. When I try to run my law practice, I go crazy. But when I, in the morning and on a regular basis, invite him in, it's practically a joy. And maybe that's the word, joy. Maybe that's the word that is an obtainable state to me. Anyway, I want to thank you all. You've been a very good audience for listening to me. And this really has been a neat experience. And I feel like where's that auction, that old violin? I just feel like I've been touched by the Master. I really do. I feel grateful. You have rebuilt me. You have given me an opportunity to be whole and to be somewhat productive. And I thank you very much.
Thank you, Jason, for coming and sharing with us, and we have for you a book, a little memento of this occasion, and I'll give you the cover to go